Okay, welcome back. Now let's talk about something called the knowledge environment. That's the way we like to frame the ecosystem, if you will, in which knowledge moves through an organization. So we're going to talk three things here. We're going to talk about the knowledge environment and the different components of the knowledge environment. We're going to talk about knowledge flow and how it moves through that organization. And we're going to talk about the interactions that are necessary to make that flow occur. Remember in the last module we talked about the traditional model, the traditional view of KM, the three equally spaced circles there, overlapping Venn diagram, people, process, and technology. But as I mentioned earlier, we don't think that that's sufficient to be able to cover the things that actually occur in real businesses. It's a nice theoretical model, but when you get down to the practical, there's a little bit more to it. So our model includes 7 different components. It adds to the people, process, and technology, that organizational culture, the organizational structure, the content type that you're using, and overlays across the top of that knowledge leadership. The other thing that's different about our model is people, processes, and technology are not all the same size. They're not exactly balanced. This has been one of the problems in trying to execute and initiate a lot of KM programs, is people trying to keep these in equal balance. It just never works. So you've got to think of those 3 circles in the middle, the people, the process, and technology, as very elastic. Some organizations have a much larger need for the people part of this. Some would have a much larger need for the technology. Some are much more process-based. So those are the things that have flexibility in there. And that entire larger oval there creates this in the bigger ecosystem under which all of this operates. We'll talk about the specifics of each one of these in just a second. The idea of knowledge flow is absolutely critical. Knowledge is not of any value to an organization if it's not moving. If you take the quintessential information that's going to make your company millions of dollars and you put it in a database and nobody can get it, nobody knows it's there, nothing will happen. The company will not improve, the company will not prosper by that. If you take the wisest people in your organization who have the most experience and don't try to capture and transfer some of that experience in a meaningful way with people by getting them talking to people, other people in the organization who are now coming up and are getting ready to do the kinds of things they did, then your business will more likely suffer. So flow is very important. Knowledge only has value when it's moving. In fact, it's the only commodity that I know of that actually increases in value as it moves. And the way we get knowledge moving through the organization is this thing called interactions. And we've talked about before these 3 types of interactions that enable knowledge flow. They optimize flow by enabling the interactions of the people to systems, and the systems to systems. And as a knowledge manager, when I find roadblocks and barriers in knowledge flow, I go look at these 3 different types of interactions, and I promise you that I can find one or more that's clogging up the system. So we want interactions between people, where we're connecting people together, and that could be one-to-one or one-to-many. We want people to connect to content, and that can be in a repository, it could be on a bookshelf, it could be in my bottom desk drawer. It really doesn't matter, it's wherever the important content is kept. But we want them connecting, and there's an element of technology in there because the interface that they use to get into that repository might be the barrier that's holding them back. We want our systems. We want our systems to pass information to each other because that's the most efficient way of doing business. And when we can get many of our transactions down to a system to system, then we can worry about the higher level cognitive skills and higher level decision making that has to go on in an organization. So we want systems passing to one another. So when I put information about Mike in this particular system, I want that information to be populated into other systems so I'm not having to go back and put it into 3 or 4 or 5 other systems. We want our systems talking to one another, and we know today that that's a real big problem. When we're buying systems that are not compatible, We have to spend some time thinking about how do we build a bridge between those systems as opposed to necessarily throwing out a system and completely redoing it. If you keep these interactions in mind when you're looking at how knowledge flows through the organization, you can't go wrong. But remember, for people-to-people transfer, that's high relationships. There may not be technology at all. That might be the pizza party on Friday afternoon that brings people together. The conversation around the water cooler. The way an executive changes their meeting so that instead of the staff briefing the boss and the boss giving directions to the staff, that it becomes a collaborative meeting. Those are places where you want to connect people together in those conversations. Having people connect to the content wherever it is, first you have to know where it is. Second, you have to have access to it. Third, you got to know what you're looking for. So you've got to think about what are the things that we have to put in place to make sure people can get to the content that they need to do their everyday business. And lastly, the system-to-system piece there again. That's very technology-centric. That's about making sure that information from one can get to the other. Sometimes it has to go through a human to be put into a new system that doesn't talk to the old system. So let's focus on those bridges because it's much cheaper to build a bridge than it is to build monolithic systems that then all of a sudden are outdated because one part of them changes. High relations on one side, high technology on the other. It's the only way to make knowledge flow in your organization.